David Eccles School of Business, and I'm coming to you from the Mariner S. Eccles Institute for Economic and Quantitative Analysis. We're certainly glad to welcome the construction and real estate industry here today to this installment of Navigating COVID-19. You know, our school has a deep and long history with the construction and industry and real estate industry. Way back at the turn of the 20th century, David Eccles capitalized or recapitalized a small company called Utah Construction. Later on, Mariner Eccles became the chairman of the board of that institution, and that institution went on to build the Hoover Dam and was later sold in the 1970s to General Electric. So we're happy to have this industry with us here today. These series are being broadcast throughout the state and beyond, thanks to a generous donation from the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation, and they're an intellectual collaboration with the Cynosure Group and Levitt Partners. Today, we're going to focus specifically on the construction industry and what it is doing during this strange economic time. It's my pleasure now to welcome to the stage NATALIE GOCHNOUR, an assistant dean here at the David Eccles School of Business and also the director of the Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute. NATALIE?
Thank you, Taylor. Kind of you. We have a very informative program prepared, and I'm excited to share our guests with our audience today. We're going to provide insights into how our viewers can build their way back to a prosperous economy. Today, we are featuring the construction and real estate industries with a tie to retail trade. Nearly a quarter of all jobs in Utah are tied to construction, real estate, and retail trade industries. That's about 300,000 jobs. And it's important that these vital industries be healthy for the Utah economy to build its way back. Today on our program, we have Linda Wardell, the general manager of City Creek Center. It's one of the largest mixed-use developments in the nation. Linda will draw from her more than 25 years of experience in marketing shopping centers to help share perspective and advice. I'm particularly interested in Linda's perspective since retail has been one of the hardest hit industries in the COVID-19 downturn, including a negative impact on many planned retail construction projects. After Linda, we'll hear from David Layton, the president and CEO of Layton Construction, a nationally ranked commercial contractor. Dave will share perspective and advice about how construction companies can build their way back. Dave will emphasize the importance of workers following public health guidelines. Dave will be followed by Steve Price. Steve is the president and CEO of Price Real Estate, based in Salt Lake City with a presence across several Western states. Price Real Estate focuses on distribution, warehousing, manufacturing, medical, and emerging related supply chain operations. Steve will provide an update on the industrial sector. After Steve, we're going to hear from Brandon FUGAL. Brandon is the chairman of Colliers International's Utah's office. Colliers is a global real estate firm with a significant local presence here in Utah. Brandon and his team are at the front lines of the Utah economy, helping tenants and landlords succeed. He will share insights from the commercial and office sector impacts. But before we hear from our panelists, I would like to turn the time to my colleague at the Gardner Institute, Dayan Eskich. Dayan is a senior research analyst at the Institute, and he's an expert on construction and real estate. Dayan, I understand you have an update on Utah's real estate market to share with us. I'm going to turn the time over to you.
I do. Thank you, NATALIE. I will do an overview of our real estate market, and April is a very pivotal month. It is the first month we're truly able to capture the full impacts of what's going on. And if you look up on your screen, here we have a chart, and on your right, the chart shows unemployment by real estate areas our panelists will discuss, and we'll go over this in a minute. But first, let's look at the table on the left side of the screen, and I wanted to do a quick update on our housing market. We typically track housing metrics by month over previous year. Here we have April 2020 changes over April of 2019. And we have four key metrics we look at. We're looking at price of existing sales, the number of existing homes sold, rents, and new construction. Now, we started off the first quarter pretty strong. It was the best ever, actually, beating historic records from the mid-2000s in terms of permitting new units. Now, people always ask me, what are prices going to do? Historically, prices don't move much during a recession. Typically, sellers don't list because buyers are expecting lower prices. Buyers become hesitant because of economic concerns. In this case, we have both buyers and sellers hesitant to have people in their houses and have people visiting other people's houses. So that's caused things to slow down a bit in terms of activity. The exception would be the last recession, which was caused by a housing market collapse due to oversupply. Now, the impacts of COVID-19 are being felt in the housing market, but not in the prices yet, at least. If we compare April 2020 to last year, prices are up 6.3%, pretty strong, but the number of homes sold was actually down 24%. This is a big deal, especially as April is usually the start of the home buying season. Rents are unchanged in April compared to last year. They climbed up in the winter, but have since declined, which led to them basically staying flat. We currently have about 5,500 new apartments under construction up and down the Wasatch Front. This increased supply of rental units, combined with the loss of 300,000 jobs we've lost in the last 6 weeks approximately, will put some serious pressure on the market, and inevitably we're going to see our vacancy rates go up a little bit and rents might move downwards just slightly. The biggest impact has been in the construction of new homes, where construction activity is down 45% over last year. Now, in terms of new housing, like I mentioned, 2020 had the potential to be the record year, how we started off the first quarter. As you all know, we're in a housing shortage, have been for the last good 5 years or so, and the demand is still there. So this will continue to add more pressure on the housing shortage. But we are starting to see a bit of activity pick up. Some builders have looked at their April numbers, and they are not as bad as they projected when this whole thing started. Moving on from housing now, look at the graph on your right. Think of our jobs. We all work in a building, whether that's a tech office, a law office, an industrial manufacturing plant, grocery stores, and construction sites. We're outside. What this graph shows is the percentage of office-using employees. So your lawyers, your entrepreneurs, everybody, for example, that have filed for unemployment. In this case, 5.7% of people that work in an office setting are currently unemployed. About 7% of those that work in an industrial building have filed for unemployment. 4.8% of the construction workforce are currently filing for unemployment. And retail sector has been hit the hardest, with over 12% filing unemployment. All this unemployment translates to some serious headaches for the real estate sectors, and I'm sure our panelists have plenty to say about their experience so far. So I'm excited to hear what they have to say on how to build our way back. Back to you, Natalie.
Yeah, thank you, Dayan. Very interesting. I learned several things from your presentation. I'm going to just state them back to you and get your reaction. First, we started the year strong, and then COVID-19 changed everything. Housing is off to a challenging start compared to last year with a double-digit drop. But so far, we are not seeing a drop in prices, and it seems like many home builders have actually exceeded their adjusted projections. Third, rental rates remain stable. And finally, the retail sector has been the hardest hit by far, with industrial and office a distant second, third. Did I get these about right?
Yeah, spot on.
Okay, great. Dayan, I have one follow-up question for you.
Okay.
In early April, we heard on the Eccles Symposium from Ivory Homes, Utah's largest home builder. Clark Ivory advised home builders to what he called meet the market by focusing on existing momentum for affordability, workforce housing, and first-time home builders. So affordability, first-time home builders, and workforce housing. Do you still see that as the right strategy, among others, for Utah home builders to focus on?
I do. So the demand for a starter home price point is virtually endless in our market. We're a younger demographic. Affordability is likely to become even a bigger challenge as we face this thing right now. We're experiencing historic decrease in supply currently, and we're having record unemployment. Lenders are becoming stricter with their lending requirements for the next little while. So it makes buying a home really difficult for everyone, but especially for those first-time home buyers. We're likely to see a little bump up in credit score requirements or down payments. However, it's not just about getting into the housing market, but staying in it. Right now, approximately 7.5% of our nation's mortgages are currently in forbearance. we could see an increase in evictions and foreclosures go up as well. While the CARES Act does offer protection against some of those things, we're not expecting to see a foreclosure records that we saw last time around, but I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a big bump of it. So a big chunk of our renters are currently facing really big financial challenges because a lot of them are currently unemployed, especially a lot of them are in service and retail sectors that are currently closed down. So this will be a real challenge for policymakers, and it does present an opportunity for the residential developers to find a way, as Clark mentioned, to meet the market.
Thank you, Dayon. Very important that our home building industry be strong, and I appreciate you sort of setting the table or laying out the challenges that our panelists can address. We're now going to turn to Linda Wardell. Linda is the General Manager of City Creek Center. Linda, I understand City Creek Center will be opening tomorrow. That's big news for Salt Lake City, and we'd love to hear your insights and advice at this really crucial time. So Linda, I'm going to turn the time to you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And we're so excited to be with you the day before our reopening. I'll start by saying that Dan's laid out everything very nicely and terrified me all over again. So thanks for that. We do take our reopening very seriously, though. This is a time where I feel like we're sort of negotiating on both sides a little bit. We're negotiating with our tenants, trying to make sure that they have an eye on safety as well, because safety is really our most important recovery strategy, I think, that we have, in our business. Because the other side of the equation is that we have to negotiate with our customers as well to get them to think about leaving their homes and wanting to come back into our environment. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about both sides of the equation. But I think in retail, you have to start in sort of a different place, and you have to think about what it's like for the landlord. For a long time in retail, the landlord was king, and we sort of had our way in this business. And those tables have really turned now because things are tough for retailers. Things are changing for retailers, and COVID-19 has just exacerbated all of that. Some retailers were really in a difficult position before COVID, and now they're in an even tougher position now. But the best retailers, those who are financially solid, those who are nimble, those who are able to innovate very quickly in this ever-evolving environment, and we all find that every day is different. We think those retailers who are nimble are going to be able to not only survive, but thrive. And we're already seeing evidence of that at City Creek Center. And I think not only is that going to be true for our retailers, but that's going to be true for our customers too. Those customers may need to embrace new realities. We're seeing new realities at City Creek Center, like curbside pickup. And those customers are going to be able to accept what our new operating procedures are going to be like, and you'll see those tomorrow at City Creek Center. Of course, landlords who used to be the king are now finding new ways to work with tenants. It's really a much more comfortable position for me. I like to be collaborative. I like to say, how can I help you? How can we make this work together? And so I think that's what our new reality is really all about. We have to find ways to help our tenants be successful in this very complex environment where we find ourselves operating, because really once we have a tenant open and operating, we want to keep them and we want to have them stay with us instead of having to renegotiate a new deal. And we want to figure out how to make this work for the long term together. Of course, one of the other things that people are asking us about all the time is, what is the supply and demand like for you? I think it's really too soon to say, our customer is going to come back into our environment to shop. But we think that at centers like City Creek Center that are the strongest malls, those who have great tenants like we do, we're so fortunate that about half our tenants are unique to the market. We think they will come back. And we think that we are more likely to fare well over the long term. And we're also seeing new construction. I have 3 stores that are under construction right now, and they've continued to proceed throughout our closure since March 20th. And so we're hoping that we're going to be able to open 3 new stores in the relatively short term. So I think that's a good indicator. One of the things that is a little tough for us is the supply chain is impacted. We won't open all of our stores tomorrow. In fact, we think that's going to be sort of a slow ramp up for us over the next couple of weeks. And largely those are supply chain issues. People can't get fresh merchandise in. We can't get food in, particularly for some of our eateries that have more exotic foods. Those exotic foods are just not available. Not only can, some of us not go to the grocery store and find the things that we want, our food retailers can't go to their purveyors and find the things that they need to make it happen for us. So it's just a little bit of a slow ramp up. So we're all going to need to be patient. Our merchants are using the stimulus packages, and we've been excited to see that. We've been able to help them take advantage of some of those packages. We think this has been a game changer for them, and that is going to, preserve their longevity, and we're very excited to see that. And so we're grateful to be operating in Utah. We feel like Utah has been very organized with the Utah Leads Together plan. We're very grateful to NATALIE and so many others who have worked on that plan. And we feel like we couldn't be operating in a better place to help us be well positioned to survive this pandemic. We are continuing to close deals. We feel like we had a strong pipeline of business going into this. Fortunately, City Creek Center was almost 100% occupied when we closed on March 20th. And we feel like that positions us well. Our CEO says that there are about 1,200 shopping malls that exist in America today. And he's always said that over the next few years, there will be fewer and fewer shopping malls, probably down to around 250 to 300 in the end. And we believe that COVID is just going to, exacerbate that collapse. It's going to speed up that timeline. But we firmly believe that City Creek Center will be one of those surviving malls that will, we will stand the test of time. So that's very positive for us. In our 70 years in business, we have never seen anything like this. People talk about it being unprecedented, but this is the biggest unprecedented event in our company's history. And I've grand opened quite a few shopping centers. That's what I did for a long time in this business, but I've never reopened a center. So this is something new for us that we've never really done before. We are reopening 3 centers tomorrow. So we're quite anxious to see what will be different from grand opening a center and reopening a center. There already are some differences. So in some ways, this is an exciting but a very nerve-wracking time for us. We do have lots of tenants that have missed rent payments. I think that's probably not a shocker for anyone to hear. And so again, it's all about for us right now, focusing on relationships, and preserving those for the long term. It's really all about communication right now with our tenants. And I don't think that probably differs drastically from the office segment. But we find we need to have customized conversations with each tenant. It's not the same conversation, with a Tiffany or a Louis Vuitton or a Solomon or a White House Black Market. They're all unique conversations because each business has its own needs and its own strategy that we need to be responsive to as their landlord. And finally, we are managing, ourselves all sorts of unique things that we've never done before. So we need to be nimble and flexible. We didn't know anything about physical distancing, about social distancing. We're teaching people all about hygiene, just all of these new things that we're learning in our new operations. And certainly face coverings were not a part of our world, before about a month ago. And so it's a time of new learnings for us, and we're excited about our reopening, but we surely want to get it right because we think that City Creek Center is an important part of the economic system for downtown Salt Lake City. We can do this and succeed. We think that people will feel safe about coming back downtown and hopefully about coming back to their work environments in downtown Salt Lake City as well. So we encourage your feedback, and we certainly hope that you will come and visit us soon. Thanks, NATALIE.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Very interesting, and I'm very excited to visit City Creek Center again. You mentioned the Paycheck Protection Program. I'm just going to share some stats with our viewers because I think it's interesting. We've had 2 rounds of it in our state. 43,000 Utah businesses have been recipients of the PPP program for a total of $5.4 billion that's come into the Utah economy. So that's an example of why we knew we were going to go from an urgent phase to a stabilization phase, because there are things we can do to get through tough times. Linda, I want to just summarize what I heard you say. Best retailers, like other industries, have to be nimble and innovate quickly. You mentioned that the tenant-landlord relationship will be more important than ever. I loved it when you said the landlord is no longer king, that collaboration is now, the new king. Supply chain is a bit of a challenge and will result in a gradual ramp up. I was happy to hear you're still closing deals and new stores are opening, and you're preserving relationships for the long term. Did I get that about right?
That's absolutely right, Natalie. Well said.
Great. One quick question for you. Can you just expound a little bit on why it's so important to lead with safety to restore and maintain consumer confidence?
Absolutely. We think if people don't feel safe, they won't come out of their homes. So even if we do motivate them to leave their homes, once they get here, if they don't feel safe, they're certainly not going to stay. They won't spend money, and then they won't make a return trip. And unfortunately, if we do motivate them to come to City Creek Center and they have a bad experience, they may not go anywhere else. And so it's just very important that we get it right so they do feel safe and they can continue to have these experiences out of the home. They know the right things to do, and they'll continue to restart the economy.
Thank you, Linda. Very well said. Thanks for being on the webinar with us.
Thank you for having me.
I'd now like to invite David Layton to the conversation. Dave, you lead one of Utah's largest and most prominent construction companies. We want to hear from you on how we're going to build our way back.
Okay, Natalie, thank you. I'm very honored to be here today. Certainly would like to thank the Eccles family. They do so many great things in our community, and sponsoring this series is just another one of those. So I wanted to say thanks to Spence and his family for what they're doing. And of course, the Levitt family is also involved here as well. As Dayon mentioned, the construction industry, be it commercial or residential construction, carried tremendous momentum into the teeth of this pandemic. Whether you were a small home builder or a large commercial contractor like ourselves, backlog and our book of business was very robust. And that puts us in a little different circumstance than so many other businesses throughout the country. We entered with strength, and fortunately, we have been able to be considered, the construction industry, that is, be considered as essential business by and large in most areas across the country. And so our challenges have been different in that we have been able to continue to work day in and day out. That caused us in early February and March to really continue to look closely at what was emerging. And ultimately, we decided that we first needed to turn our attention to our employees. And through this, we really needed to prioritize their health, reassure them of their employment, and take care of them in any way that they would deem would be essential. And of course, we closed our offices early, and fortunately, because we have robust technology and systems, our administrative and office personnel have been able to work very effectively from home. And so one would have never known the dependence we would have had on our technology, but I've got some tremendous executives here that have built this system over the past many years, and it's worked very successfully supporting our job sites from the home front. And so now if we turn our attention to the job site, which for us was also of paramount concern, because we knew we needed to keep that job site healthy. We approached it much like a village, in that every worker on that job site was a member of this village. And as a member of the village, they came with responsibilities to follow the protocols, both at the job site and certainly away from the job site, because irresponsible behavior outside of work could put in jeopardy coworkers and essentially the village. And given the challenge that we have every day with social distancing at the job site, because workers frequently, by necessity, have to work closer than 6 feet to each other, even though we have rethought many of our work programs to try to spread them out, there certainly are circumstances where they have to be closer to each other. So we've implemented very thorough and detailed protocols at the job site. We've done things even like ordering more chemical toilets and wash stations, spreading those out, and also assigning those to particular trades, so we're not mixing necessarily individuals frequently in the chemical toilets. We also implemented what we believe has been very instrumental in maintaining the health of our job sites, and that's a series of 5 questions that each worker is asked by their team leader each morning, pretty much to determine if they might have had any exposure or association with someone overnight or early morning. And in many cases, we have been able to get the workers to honestly answer these questions. You know, it is an honor system, but they've been forthright. And I think they've understood the importance of the village, and they've said, hey, I may have been exposed, or in fact, I was with someone last night that had tested positive. And so we've been able to get them to go self-quarantine and ultimately get tested. And that's proven very beneficial in keeping the virus from entering into our job site. We've also had to really listen to our clients and reach out and understand their concerns, their priorities. In some cases, we've had a couple of clients say that they wanted to shut the project down and not put anyone at risk. But by and large, we have 175 projects spanning over 20 states throughout the country. And our clients have wanted to continue to work, but they've wanted to do it in the safest manner possible, the most healthy manner. And we've collaborated with them to make sure these workers can come and go, and of course work safely, but also maintain their health. And thus far, it's been very effective. As Linda mentioned, things change frequently. You develop plans and then you learn of new information. And I think it's very important that we as owners and leaders of our businesses really have our ear to the ground. I felt like this was one of the responsibilities I had to take care of to ensure that we were staying contemporary with what was being learned. And so early on, we built plans and communicated to our workforce, but yet we would learn new information, which put a responsibility on us to assimilate that information and then, in fact, re-communicate modifications. And we've had to work hard because this can be a confusing circumstance for a worker. But we've stayed with it, and we think ultimately it's proven effective. You know, to give you an example, you take a project in California, and you've got Governor Newsom that is laying out his expectations and protocols. You then have the county mayor in Los Angeles issue other protocols, and now down into, say, the city of Long Beach, the mayor and that council is issuing yet again other protocols. So we've had to really stay on top of what is being expected from the government level and ensure that we comply with that. And again, I can't stress enough how valuable it's been to really engage the employee and have them know that we're really trying to look out for their health, because ultimately we recognize that they could in fact be infected by a coworker, and ultimately take that home into their family and loved ones. And so we've worked hard so that they have confidence to come to work and know that their health is not going to be jeopardized. We, as an industry, we're going to have to really look forward. I think the momentum has really tempered the impact thus far, but I foresee the next 7.5 months being very telling of where our industry ends up going into 21 and 22. We've got to engage our customers and talk about new issues. We've got to talk about the supply chain. We've got to talk about what type of CapEx they're looking to move forward with, how their pro forma is going to play into the design and construction of the project and any modifications that might be made. Being creative to offer solutions in areas where we may be able to postpone or delay some of the work to save some money and yet continue with other aspects of the project that the client may deem essential. So very, very important to engage in those conversations and make sure that the client knows we are in lockstep with them in terms of helping their business successfully come through this. Often construction projects are the largest expenditure for any business. And so the need or even the absolute requirement to save money in the business may pour right over into the construction project. And our customers just need to feel that we're right there with them in being able to modify scope of work to ultimately deliver a successful outcome for them. And then finally, let me just wrap up by saying, for me, some of the greatest experiences of my career have been just recently where I've continued to stay present, be active, be out on some job sites. And in fact, recently, I'm starting to now travel throughout the country to get to our job sites. I want to be with our team members. I want to understand their concerns. I want to make sure that we're in alignment with their expectations about health and safety. I want to be out with customers. So I think as owners and leaders, we've got to be present. We've got to carry a message that's positive, and we've got to be proactive. We've got to be thinking forward. And in many ways, I think these are the keys to our industry being able to continue successfully into the future.
David, thank you. That was terrific. I'm going to just try briefly to summarize what I learned. You mentioned that construction actually entered this crisis strong. And because it's classified as an essential business, that's been a real positive. You talked about how important it is to not only take care of your employees on your job sites to keep them clean and safe, but to keep them safe at home. You really stressed the value of communication. And I think that I love how you provided that great leadership advice to be present, to carry a positive message and a proactive message. Did I get that about right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I'm sure I missed a few things. I do have one follow-up for you, Dave, and I know you actually shared it, but you mentioned that you ask your employees 5 questions when they return to the work site. And I think this is so interesting because part of our economic success depends on our compliance to public health instructions as we manage this new risk. Can you tell our audience what those questions are to the best of your memory?
Yeah. In general, we're asking if they have been anywhere outside of the general area. If they've, and some of this applies probably more frequently to say a weekend or whatnot, but have they been outside the general area? Have they been associating with anyone who has been symptomatic? Are they symptomatic themselves? Have they been with anyone who ultimately has tested positive? These are the types of questions. And again, it is the honor system, but we've had a couple of very good circumstances where we've had employees call in early on, let me just say a Monday morning and say, look, I was with someone who tested positive. I probably shouldn't come in. And so now we're in a position where we're able to deal with that appropriately rather than them coming to the job site and finding out partway through the workday that they've been with somebody who has tested positive. They're not symptomatic, but they may be spreading the virus, and now it's too late because they've got into the village and they've infected it. So
Yeah.
we're really trying to take a proactive measure, and a credit to the workers. They have embraced this because they know we're kind of all in this together.
Yeah, you're definitely making it easy for them to do the right thing, which I think is positive. So thank you, David. It's a good time for me now to remind our viewing audience that we really welcome your questions, and we'd love you to send them in via the chat function shown on your screen, and we have some time for Q&A, and we will try to get to them. I'm going to now turn to industrial real estate. Steve Price joins us with Price Real Estate. Steve, we'd love to hear your thoughts about COVID-19 and the industrial real estate sector. How are we going to build our way back?
Natalie, Taylor, thank you. I as well want to thank the University of Utah, the Eccles School of Business, the Chem C. Gardner Policy Institute, the Eccles family, the Levitt family and organization for all of the support for important programs like this. So, as the COVID crisis began in mid-March, we stood up a COVID leadership team on Monday, March 16th. We could see that something was happening. I happened to be out of town for spring break, and I was just reading the international media, and I could see. Then the earthquake hit on Wednesday, March 18th, and the epicenter was 1.5 miles from the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City. It was 1.5 miles away from 3.5 million square feet of buildings that we own. So that hit at about 7:10 in the morning, and by 8 o'clock, we had split into 2 teams. We each had a structural engineer, an electrician, and a plumber. And we had some pretty quick decisions to make because COVID had knocked some of the businesses onto their heels. When you're in some of these buildings that are 32 to 36 foot tall, and you have palletized racking, 5 or 6 tiers high, the earthquake knocked our tenants off of their feet. And so we knew that we had a really different situation. So we had choices to make. So we began with the Delta commissary. So we made sure that all the Delta flights had food. Then we decided to go to work through our life science businesses, heart valves, knees, hips. Then we stood up blood storage. So we happened to store all of the blood in this time zone and all the strategic blood in this time zone. Then we moved into the Amazon facility that we had. Then we moved to food supply and PPE businesses. And we started to hear and see some things pretty quickly, not because of COVID, but because of the earthquake. And so we were starting to hear things, and I was with the team. And so we started at 8 o'clock Wednesday morning, and we didn't finish our last building until Thursday night. And between the 2 teams, we were in each of those buildings. Then we had a team in the office, and we were hearing about supply chain, and we were hearing about, what are our tenants thinking about COVID, and how are they working, and what are we doing? And so that was a keen insight for us that we never would have had into where our tenants, our businesses in the supply chain are and what their mindset was. We inspected 57 buildings and 107 tenants within that 2-day period of time. The following Wednesday, there was an earthquake in central Idaho. And so with the properties that we have in Boise, we just deployed again and left at 11 o'clock at night and had to do the same thing in Boise. But by now we had the COVID experience in teams. We had the earthquake teams, and we were starting to hear some things in those 2 markets. So with that early insight, we could see there were imminent disruptions in the supply chain. Our tenants were telling us that they were imminent. So we started to hear that there were going to start to be shortages of brakes and brake pads. So 2 provinces away from Wuhan, they make brake and brake pads. 3 provinces away, shoes, shoelaces, zippers, and buttons. We could see that there were going to be shoelace and thread shortages. So it may not be a clothing shortage, but we could see that we were hearing from our tenants there were supply chain shortages. Grout and sealant. So Mapei shut down their grout factories. We're running out of grout in America. You can buy tile, but you can't buy grout. Medical grade plastic for injection molding. We couldn't get it to the United States. What our tenants were telling us is they had thickened the supply chain, or they had built their inventories because of the trade wars that were going on and tariffs. And so it gave the businesses in America, the supply chain businesses in warehouse and industrial buildings, a buffer because they had extra products. So we were hearing that. But we also heard that if we can't get brakes or brake pads, we start to run out of brakes and brake pads for some vehicles in 40 days, threat in 30 days. And so we thought, well, what does that mean and what can we do? We knew pretty quickly there may be a force majeure act. And if you Google it today, it's one of the trending topics. So is this an act of God or is it a man-caused situation? Because if it's a force majeure situation, tenants are in a very different position than landlords. But every landlord, or at least most landlords, have a mortgage, and forbearance is not an option for a landlord. So the strategies that we came up with were this. So we knew that rent was a fixed cost. It's like a utility. So we've got to pay a mortgage every month, and every single building has a mortgage. And that's an obligation that the tenant has, rent and mortgage, because those two are related. But there were other things that we could do. So we started to see really quickly, just as, and the supply chain was telling us we're not running out of toilet paper. People are hoarding toilet paper. We're not running out of paper towels. Individuals are hoarding paper towels. Well, the same thing was happening in the livestock industry. The same thing was happening with gluten-free foods. The same thing was happening with all kinds of different products. And we could see that happening pretty quickly. And so we have about 1.5 million vacant feet. And we were really the first in the market to say, okay, what short-term leases are out there? Who needs space immediately? So we knew that Harmon's needed space. We knew that Costco needed space. We knew that Whole Foods needed space. And then what we started to see really quickly is that there were businesses that were also growing rapidly. So that for one of the first slides that Dayan showed was really interesting, looking at the unemployment within the industrial sector. We have some tenants where we can't keep up with their growth today. So the 9th COVID kit in America happened to be developed by one of our tenants. They have a White House contract. So when the White House talks about this saliva test, that's coming from a business in Draper. Well, they came to us with 12,000 feet, 30,000 feet, 40,000 feet, 80,000 feet, 100,000 feet. And as we were working with the tenant, we felt that this was a part of being a part of the Utah solution, but also how do we work that through with the lender and how much do we spend as a landlord to help build out this space? And through the DOD, they have 10 medical device product lines that are coming here short order. That means like next week. So how do we get the electrical? And we had some of those issues. So our solution was let's provide temporary space. We had other tenants that said, gosh, we want to have contactless interactions with our customers. So Dow Tile says, we've got 110,000 feet of granite in a building. But and the architectural industry, home builders, individuals, everyone wants to come and see granite, but we don't want them in our building. So can we use part of the truck court, much like a pickup at Nordstrom, much like a pickup at one of our restaurants, for contactless drive-through? And so we said, gosh, we can do those kind of things, but you've got to pay the rent, because our landlords were pretty ferocious, our lenders were pretty ferocious with us in early March and early April, saying there will be no forbearance, you're going to pay. And this is what happens if you don't. We started to see that we're at about 140% of truck driver capacity right now on our interstates, I-15 and I-80. All of our truck drivers sleep in truck stops overnight. And there isn't enough berth space or sleeping space for truck drivers. So we worked with Jack Hedge with the Inland Port, and we said, what do you need? What does the state of Utah need? So we stood up within about 10 days, 250 trailer stalls that we have so that those truck drivers can pull off I-80 or I-15 at the end of their 11 hours. Now, something else we didn't expect to happen. Another disruption to the supply chain wasn't just the shortage of some materials, it's that a truck driver could drive much further in a much shorter period of time. So through the evolution and the growth of the trucking industry, we pretty much know across America how long it's going to take to get, for example, from the LA basin to Salt Lake City. Well, if you shorten that by 2.5 hours, it disrupts everything in America. It was happening East Coast, West Coast, North and South. And so truck drivers were getting there sooner, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day. they're taxed, they're stressed, there's no sleeping space for them. And so we stood up 250 stalls and helped provide food trucks every day so that when someone pulls off, they have a restroom on site, they've got food on site. And we just thought that that was something that we could do to help in kind of the Utah effort to help the economy moving. We saw a resilience. If you can pull up this first slide, please. If you look at the supply chain dynamics, we started to hear pretty quickly since the 1980s, we've been leaning out the supply chain. And it's lean, the English word, but it's also lean, the Japanese word. So just-in-time delivery. And with a single source, Asia primarily, but not always Asia, we could see that the supply chain was getting too lean. And so we will rapidly move from a just-in-time inventory to a just-in-case inventory. That's a radical change within the supply chain. We started to see reshoring immediately. So we've heard about reshoring. The Trump administration and others have talked about reshoring. As a part of these federal stimulus acts, there are also components in those stimulus programs requiring onshoring back in America, in the continental United States. And we can see for sure that's happening with PPE, pharma, medical device, medical equipment. E-commerce adoption. Amazon and others have been trying to pierce the 20% ceiling. They can't break it. 90% of Americans live within 10 miles of a Walmart store. Walmart has not been able to pierce 50% grocery store sales in any store. Last week, they were at 63%, the week before 54%, the week before 52%. So we're going to start to see some pretty radical changes. We think these are permanent adoptions. Certainly the supply chain does. So last week, 54% of all consumer and retail sales in America were online. So there were people that just didn't want to adopt. They wanted to go to their local bookstore. They didn't want to give their information out. They weren't familiar with how it worked. So we can see that e-commerce and our companies are building and consumer goods have moved about 50%. Walmart's now moving to 60% in grocery sales. What's interesting is that most of that increase has been pick up at the store or pick up at one of the remote locations. Strategic reserve. The U.S. government will require, the healthcare system will require life, bioscience, medical device manufacturing, pharmaceutical, aerospace and defense, other manufacturing, and certain businesses will mandate and require critical products are short in the United States. That's coming. It's happening. We can already see the RFPs and requirements. If you can move to the second slide deck, please. This is a slide from McKinsey and Company. And the reason that this slide is so important, and maybe just focus on the 6 boxes in the bottom, McKinsey knew pretty quickly that the supply chain had been disrupted. And so just as there are certain products that won't be at City Creek, there are certain products in the construction sector, the medical sector, every sector of the economy that just aren't going to be available. And as we move from Asia to onshoring, this is just an important slide to look at and maybe dwell on in the future of what that means. If you can move to, I believe it's the third slide, which is slide 13. Here's what the Utah demand drivers are going to be. We'll see an increased demand for warehousing. It's happening right now. Now, some businesses are shrinking and some are in crisis and some are trying to figure out, how do we move forward? Manufacturing. The manufacturing in Utah is very, very robust compared to the U.S., especially in defense, life science, food grade manufacturing, medical device, product manufacturing, as well as our homegrown industries. So for sure, we can see the vitamin industry, the MLM industry, the nutraceutical, health and beauty, contract manufacturing. We cannot keep up with the expansion of contract manufacturing. So that may be someone with, a run on, a sun care product. It may be a run on a vitamin. It may be a run on, a digestive aid. And so Utah is kind of filling that void where maybe something is cycling down. They're filling the space. The other thing we're seeing is a lot of companies are being resilient. So, for example, we have a tenant that lost outdoor retailers. It was 30% of their business. They just brought in 10 million masks from 3M in Poland from their manufacturing facility. Within 4 days, they came from Poland to Salt Lake City. filling part of that 30% void. But also what they're doing is they're hosting 63 of the high school graduations, and they help stand up with their convention center expertise, some of the COVID drive-through tents. So we've seen resilience in Utah companies much more so than we saw in 2008, much more so than we saw in 9/11 or the dot bomb era. Municipal closures really hurt us in certain ways. So just as Dave mentioned, city encounter closing and distancing measures, it's really affected the contractors, our tenants, our businesses. And some cities have been aware and responded appropriately. Other cities have continued measures, and it's been probably the largest obstacle next to COVID and the earthquake for some of our businesses, is that cities are distanced and individuals in some of these cities, for example, four-way inspection before you close up a wall. Dave, that's been a real problem for us. So it's stopped construction. Permits are just lost in this void. Building permits and other things. So that's been a real obstacle for us and our tenants.
Steve, thank you for that. I feel like working at Price Real Estate would feel like being lightning in a bottle. You've been really busy, a lot going on.
It feels like 8 pounds of coffee in a 5-pound can.
And you got an earthquake to boot.
Yes.
Let me just try and quickly summarize what I heard. You saw very early interruptions in the supply chain. It's really affected industrial real estate. I loved your thought about how just-in-time inventory will shift to just-in-case inventory.
Correct.
This means we're going to see larger inventories and more demand for warehousing. We'll also see more reshoring, particularly in some industries like medical equipment. You mentioned the demand drivers will be increased for warehousing and continued strong manufacturing in Utah. And then I thought it was quite interesting how the delays in municipal services, like for entitlements, permitting, approvals, and inspections,
Yes.
have actually been a problem. That's something we should be able to control here in our state. So something to pay attention to. I get this about right?
Yes. Perfect.
Thank
Great
you,
executive
Steve.
summary.
Just real quickly, a 30-second response. How does this COVID-19 crisis impact Utah's plans for the inland port?
You know, if you think about the supply chain, goods, products, and people can only move 4 ways: by road, rail, air, and sea. And what Utah has not had, we have fabulous air service. And you know from your time on the airport board and your leadership that we aren't just moving passengers, we're moving freight in planes. It's not luggage in the bottom of the plane, it's actually freight. I-80 and I-15 give us tremendous connectivity to the ports on the West Coast. We really service the states north of us, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. Everything comes out of Utah, everything. As a matter of fact, regional medicine, regional oncology supply, rail. You know, we have 3 transcontinental rail lines. 151 years ago at Promontory, the transcontinental UP, the first line was connected. But what we're missing is a maritime connection. And it's not just the ability to get products to Utah. We can do it. The idea and concept of an inland port is to create an outbound strategy, an export strategy for Utah, so that we're not so dependent on retail sales and consumer and construction and those other components of our economy. So the
Steve,
inland port.
Do you think this accelerated or decelerated the progress on the inland port?
It should accelerate and it needs to accelerate, because what we need and what we will have to recover and be robust in the future, well, in some ways we'll have to be more self-reliant. We're going to have to be more resilient on the continental United States. And so we want to make sure that we have a maritime connection, both for inbound product and freight, and more importantly, outbound. It's part of the reason that we look at restructuring all of our taxes and the work that we've been doing at the legislature. It's that retail sales and other sales are going to shift to an online economy. What we want to do is make sure we can build the manufacturing sector along the Wasatch Front in Utah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Steve.
You're welcome.
We're now going to go to the commercial side of the house. Our final guest is Brandon FUGAL with Colliers International. Brandon, please share your insights and advice from the vantage point of commercial real estate.
It's a privilege to be with you. Special thanks to the University of Utah, the Eccles family, Levitt family, and this prestigious group of business leaders that I have the honor of presenting with today. Commercial real estate is in a very unique position. We're really foundational to our economy, and we contribute over $1 trillion to U.S. GDP every year. In addition to that, of course, we have over 9 million jobs attributed to commercial real estate, and really focus on the industrial, office, retail, and hospitality sectors. Steve just did a great job kind of providing an overview regarding the industrial sector, which has actually remained strong, robust, and is going to come roaring out of this crisis, I predict, stronger than ever. The office market is going to experience some difficulty. While not as impacted as the retail and hospitality sector, we're going to see office users, take a very close look at densities and their workspace environments as we move forward with this new world that we're encountering and trying to deal with this crisis. So we're in a very interesting position as we're entering the weeks ahead and grappling with the challenges that this crisis has brought. Colliers International, as a firm globally, has done a great job. We've successfully transitioned almost immediately to a remote working format. We can thank technology, the initiatives that were put in place over the course of the last decade with that success. We've remained fully operational in spite of remote working, and have really established a model that we can really pass on to our clients and help implement with our clients on a grand scale. Our office here in Utah is significant. We have 5 offices, over 240 professionals. I'm thankful to note, at least as of today, no one has been infected. We're closely monitoring our population and our offices, which span from really southern Utah all the way up to northern Utah. That we've thankfully been fortunate, and I hope that's a good positive indication of what is to come. As a global company, we're in 68 countries. We have 17,000 professionals and 500 offices. And as one might expect, there are regions that have been impacted more than others. Our offices on the East Coast, for example, are dealing with more acute issues than our Utah offices, and we have to be sensitive to that and really look to the standards that are being established in other markets in order to deal with these challenges. One thing we did over the course of the last several weeks in dealing with the challenges is we developed a back to business primer for occupiers, tenants, investors, and landlords, and in 12 pages went into great detail relative to the policies, procedures, the exact course to take in order to bring our offices back to work, in order to instill confidence and to really implement the right type of health and safety standards that can help us bring everyone back online. I think it's important that we get the machinery back in full swing here and full operation. But with that comes great responsibility, and we have to be sensitive to the issues that we've been encountering and to do so in the proper way. With this crisis, we've seen some channels or portions of our economy thriving, and we project that there will be great strength in certain sectors. We have identified initially 12 channels that are going to thrive in the months and years potentially to come. Those include e-commerce retailers, no surprise, industrial real estate that has been covered, but augmented reality, I think, will be even more important as we move forward. Robotics, 5G connectivity. We all have now seen real time on a day-to-day basis how important our connectivity is to keeping everything moving. Virtual meetings, online groceries, last mile distribution, dark kitchens, reverse globalization, supply chain resilience, and e-learning will be very important and will thrive in the future. And we're positioning to be able to accommodate those industries and those channels Uh, there are those that are impacted most right now: our retailers, our restaurants, our entertainment venues, our hospitality sector. And I think being positive and supportive of these industries and helping them really get creative in response to this time, and to really stand up as a community to help them and to support them in order to keep them really viable is important. And that really is on all of our shoulders going forward. I think we as a community have learned firsthand over the course of the last 6 weeks how interconnected and codependent we really are. And I think, being positive, being responsive, being supportive of each other, and being quick and nimble to offer solutions will be what sets Utah apart from the rest of the country. I have to applaud our governor. I mean, we're one of 5 states in the country that really didn't implement draconian measures. We really had a governor that took, I think, a very proactive, in fact, I believe in a lot of respects, the most proactive approach to this crisis, as the first to really develop a plan with our own NATALIE GOCHNOUR here that has been implemented. But also, we've tried to teach correct principles and allow people to still govern themselves accordingly. And I think that that has worked and is manifest in the numbers and the data that we're seeing, that is supporting our move from this red zone to an orange designation, and hopefully will carry us through to green and being open in the months to come, and being a model for the rest of the country. Utah has always taken a leading position as the crossroads of the West, and I think we have a unique opportunity as business leaders, as members of our communities, to really help the rest of the country see how to do it right and how to support each other in order to prevail in this crisis, and hopefully take advantage of this opportunity to show how truly aligned we are as a community. And it's a privilege to be a part of that community. I mean, commercial real estate touches everyone. I've always said that, in addition to death and taxes being constants, real estate is something that is inescapable. If you hope to be alive or in business, everyone has to have a real estate strategy, especially during these difficult times. And having a trusted advisor to help guide them through this really treacherous minefield that we're facing is more important than ever. So thank you everyone for tuning in and really taking, I think, steps to better our communities.
Very good. Thank you, Brandon. If I were to kind of summarize this, you mentioned that commercial real estate is vital to our economy, and thankfully commercial real estate services in our state have been fully operational during this time. You did mention that office market will experience some difficulty as densities are impacted, and telework has proven to be a successful enterprise. I liked how you were positive about these channels of commercial real estate that will thrive in the post-COVID world, whether it be e-commerce, industrial, the dark kitchens, e-learning, and others. You made a point about us expecting a reverse globalization to be a dominant trend. I saw that on your slide. You applauded state leadership for their response, and then you encouraged everyone to have a real estate strategy. One quick follow-up that I would just ask, you mentioned the Back to Business primer that Colliers has prepared. Is that something you could share with viewers if the Eccles School were to make that available?
Absolutely. In fact, I forwarded that on preparatory to our panel discussion today to those on our panel. And if you wish to distribute that or circulate that and make that available, I'd encourage that and approve sending that out, because it really does apply across all sectors. It's not just office oriented. It really can be implemented office, retail, industrial, hospitality, etc., and provide some detailed guidance. And I think that's what people are looking for right now. People are looking for detailed guidance so then they can execute in their places of business and even in their homes, and be able to utilize these best practices to bring business online. It is critical that we get business back online, but we do it in a responsible way.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brandon. Very helpful. I now want to bring in a colleague of mine, Andrea Thomas, who's the Assistant Dean for Undergraduate Studies at the David Eccles School of Business. Andrea, I know you've been watching the chat line and have a few questions for our panelists, so I'll turn the time to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Natalie. A couple of questions just asking for a little bit more specific information. So Brandon, you talked a little bit about office space demand and how working remotely might impact that. Can you provide more specifics over the long term and what you think will happen as people get more comfortable with working from home? Brandon, we need your mute off too.
You can unmute me. Okay. Can you hear me now? All right. Good question. Over the course of the last decade, we've seen a densification of office users occur where companies are trying to cram historically more people than ever in less space. We're definitely going to see those measures relaxed and people more sensitive to allowing more space to be between employees. And I think that densification is going to be revised significantly. The remote working phenomenon that we're witnessing here will definitely have an impact, and we have yet to really see how to really measure that impact and really be able to quantify that in terms of square footage and what kind of adjustment will be made to our office market. But it will definitely cause companies in the weeks and months to come to adjust their workplace strategies. I will say this. I think with a few exceptions, it is impossible to maintain a corporate culture, a unique company culture, and also accountability in a long-term remote working Zoom, Brady Bunch tile video conferencing world. I think this has been great and is a great tool for productivity, but I think it really in so many ways doesn't replace the collaboration, the critical progression that we see with companies and execution that comes from really the casual collisions that exist in the workplace, and being able to see your coworkers and to be able to really drive decision making and innovation going forward. It's tough to innovate in an environment like this. It's not impossible, but I think that office space will continue to be an important component of our economy. And if anything, I would hope that this crisis underscores how important it is to really to take advantage of those interactions that we have with our coworkers and make the most of our meetings and our opportunity to interact in the workplace. So we'll see some adjustment. It has yet to really be quantified, though.
Great, thank you. We had a question about some home building, residential home. What measures are home builders taking to ensure safety in model homes during the pandemic? Is there anything doing the whole house disinfectant sprays, a recommendation for methods that work best?
Andrea, this is Natalie. I think Dayan and Dave Layton may have a comment there, but I know they're doing a lot of private showings. And Dave, Dayan, how would you respond to the questioner?
Yeah, keeping kind of touch with some of our home builders here locally. A lot of them have canceled walkthroughs. I'm personally in the market myself right now, so a lot of virtual tours. If you're going to a design center, it's by appointment only. There's a whole screening section that they go through to make sure nobody's exposed. A lot of personal protection equipment going in. So it's become very, very hands-on is maybe the wrong word, but the safety aspect of it has been really implemented on a level that we've not seen before. So it's by appointment only, no more walkthroughs. Everything gets wiped down every time somebody comes in. That's been my experience so far.
And then private showings where you can. Dave, I'm going to invite you to jump in here, but I'll just say that a theme of these forums has been that businesses have to adapt. And that's what we've seen with home sales. Dave Layton, do you have something you'd like to add?
You know, we don't do any residential construction, certainly not single family, so I'm not the best to respond. What I would say is there is heightened awareness of what's going on during construction. And if you're ultimately a home buyer, I think you want to know that there's been care taken through the construction process to ensure that home stayed healthy, and that you're not buying into something that may have some kind of lingering effects. I don't think we really know how long this virus sticks around, but we certainly know that our clients for whom we're building want to know that we're taking measures during construction to ensure that surfaces and ductwork and plumbing, piping is all being installed in a healthy way so that they ultimately don't realize some kind of a problem during occupancy.
Thank you. One question that we're getting, a few of you mentioned that you were still doing some business travel. I think, David, it might have been you who mentioned that. What kind of precautions do you take when you do business travel? Do you self-quarantine when you return? And if so, how long?
So I've only been out once thus far. I went to Phoenix. I was there just through the day. I took every precaution that I could take to ensure that I was maintaining my health. That was about 10 days ago. And when I came back, and really through this all, I've seen it as a prime responsibility of mine to stay healthy so that I didn't have to, try to work from a bed while I'm recovering from the virus. So I went through all the standard measures to maintain my health, and so far that's been successful. I've not yet, although this is probably coming in the next few weeks, I've not yet traveled overnight and had to stay in hotels, and so I'm going to have to take that into account. But I do see it as a huge opportunity to be out with my folks who are on the front line, listening to them, seeing what they need, what we can do for them, what we can do for subcontractors, what we can do for our clients to continue through during the pandemic.
Thank you, David. Linda, a question about retail shopping, and I don't know if you've observed because you're opening up tomorrow, but I'm sure it's going to be changing when you go physically into stores, like trying on clothes or trying on shoes. Have you heard anything from any of your tenants on how that's going to be changing?
So we haven't heard anything from the retailers yet about what their procedures are going to be for trying on clothes or trying on shoes. I'm sure there will be some new procedures for that, but I can tell you that there are a lot of apparel retailers who are looking to operate with curbside. So I think that some of those activities, if you're looking to make a purchase where you do want to try something on, you may be, taking that with you. And I believe that there will be some pretty stringent, if you're going to return something, I know that retailers are looking at having bins where they'll place returns, and those things will be taken off site and sanitized and may never come back into our stores, sort of the same way that they have in the past. So, it's going to be a brave new world for a lot of these procedures. So we can look forward to some new experiences in retail. I think it'll be an opportunity too for technology to impact us. For a while now, there have been some retailers who've had some sort of virtual apps where we could try things on, which I've always loved because I hate to try clothes on. So, I think it's going to be an opportunity for technology to impact us in shopping and maybe make things a little bit easier for us that way.
Great, thank you. And then this final question, I think you all might have an interesting perspective on this. How are you as companies communicating with current and potential clients with the social distancing challenges?
Andrea, do you mind repeating it one more time?
Sure. How are you as a company communicating with current and potential clients with the social distancing challenges?
That's great. Let's ask each of them just real quickly. Brandon, how are you communicating with clients?
Email has become more important than ever. I mean, in a world that really transitioned to text messaging the last couple of years, where I think most of us have ended up conducting a lot of our communication via text. The problem is when you have less face-to-face human interaction and you have more information that needs to be imparted, email then becomes, I think, a more preferable medium to be able to convey ideas, share documents, and to be able to actually communicate with both clients and prospective clients, and also our employees. I mean, in order to really enact the policies, procedures that we've had to have in place in response to this crisis, I mean, thank goodness that we've had email resources and the ability to do that. And of course, it goes without saying that, this world of video conferencing is invaluable and will continue to be invaluable as we move ahead.
Brandon, I'm going to just assume for the other panelists that it's kind of the same, that we're doing electronic communication, in place of in-person communication where we need to. I just want to ask each of our panelists, this is the last question, and then we'll turn it back over to Taylor. But I'd love each panelist to think of the one word or phrase of advice that you would give to viewers who are listening, considering about the construction and real estate industry. What's the one word or phrase of advice you'd give? And Steve, we're going to go to Steve Price first.
I see a lot of positiveness in people's attitudes, in the resilience, in the way they want to go to work and how they want to go to work. So we're seeing, it's almost like coming out of a war, like a World War II, where we have this, we don't have enough supplies and everything's been so disrupted and people are so unsettled, but individual by individual that we talk to, business owner by business owner, broker by broker, contractor by contractor, there's a resilience, there's an attitude, there's a positiveness that is resounding, and we see it everywhere.
That's great. So positivity, I'll pick the word there. How about you, Brandon?
Don't be afraid.
Phrase of advice.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help. In fact, have a trusted advisor or team of advisors that can help you guide and direct your future strategies and really the implementation of your, going back to work and being open for business.
Yeah.
I think we have great resources in our community. Utah, even though we're not a first tier market like New York or parts of California, we have world-class talent here and thought leadership. Don't be shy to reach out.
That's great. Linda Wardell, your word of advice or phrase coming from the retail perspective.
Our team has used a mantra throughout this crisis that we were going to be collaborative and we were going to be kind, because we've encountered a lot of people who were truly just scared. And so we found that our collaboration and our kindness has really helped us through this crisis.
Love it. David, we're going to give you the last word, and then we'll turn it over to Dean Taylor Randall.
Yeah, I would go back to what I said earlier about being present. We need to do this responsibly, but as things continue to open up, we've got to be there. It's a time for leadership. It's a time to convey a positive message. It's a time to help our teammates through their concerns, their fears. How do we address that? If you're not present, I think you're going to be missing an opportunity. So I would say be present.
Yeah. Thank you, David. I've really appreciated the panelists and their perspectives. I think it's going to help us build back our economy. I'm optimistic about Utah's future, and I'm really excited about the David Eccles School of Business and my boss, Dean Taylor Randall. Taylor, back to you.
Natalie, thanks for engaging some great panelists in a vigorous discussion today. I think we've all learned a lot. We, as always, thank the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation for making this all possible. We hope that as an audience, you'll join us on Friday as we talk about how we build confidence in this next phase of recovery. For many of us as leaders, we need to build confidence not only in our employees, but also our consumers. We'll be excited to hear from an African entrepreneur who survived the Ebola crisis with his company and how he was able to build confidence in investor groups and in clients. We'll be able to hear from a professor who is a moral psychologist who can talk specifically about the conundrums that we face as employers and employees. We have to confront our fears, but also of coming back to work and the sickness, but also our fears about the economy and actually making some money for our families. And then finally, we'll hear from David Neeleman, an airline entrepreneur who is trying to rebuild confidence in consumers of airline flights. Anyway, we look forward to seeing you on Friday. As always, keep your wits about you. We're getting through this together.